don't know if you have had the same experience, but a thing I have found in life is that from time to time, as you jog along, there occur moments which you are able to recognise immediately with the naked eye as high spots. Something tells you that they are going to remain etched, if etched is the word I want, forever on the memory, and will come back to you at intervals down the years, as you are dropping off to sleep, banishing that drowsy feeling and causing you to leap on the pillow like a gaffed salmon. One of these well-remembered moments in my own case was the time at my first private school when I sneaked down to the headmaster's study at dead of night, my spies having informed me that he kept a tin of biscuits in the cupboard under the bookshelf, to discover after I was well inside, and a modest and unobtrusive withdrawal impossible, that the old bounder was seated at his desk, and by what I have always thought a rather odd coincidence, actually engaged in the composition of my end-of-term report, which subsequently turned out a stinker. It was a situation in which it would be paltering with the truth to say that Bertram retained unimpaired his customary sang-froid. But I'm dashed if I can remember staring at the Reverend Aubrey Upjohn on that occasion with half the pallid horror with which shot into the map at these words of Gussie's. "Dropped?" I quavered. "Yes, but it's all right." "All right?" "I mean, I can remember every word of it." "Oh, I see. That's fine." "Yes." "Was there much of it?" "Oh, lots." "Good stuff?" "Of the best." "Well, that's splendid." I looked at him with growing wonder. You would have thought that by this time even this preeminent subnormal would have spotted the frightful peril that lurked, but no. His tortoise-shell-rimmed spectacles shone with a jovial light. He was full of élan and espièglerie, something, without a care in the world. All right up to the neck, but from there on pure concrete. That was Augustus Finknottle. "Oh, yes," he said, "I've got it all carefully memorised, and I'm extremely pleased with it. During this past week I have been subjecting the characters of Roderick Spode and Sir Watkin Bassett to a pitiless examination. I have probed these two gumboils to the very core of their being. It's amazing the amount of material you can assemble once you begin really analysing people. Have you ever heard Sir Watkin Bassett dealing with a bowl of soup? It's not unlike the Scottish Express going through a tunnel. Have you ever seen Spode eat asparagus? No. Revolting. It alters one's whole conception as man as nature's last word." "Those are two of the things you wrote in the book?" "I gave them about half a page. They were just trivial surface faults. The bulk of my researches went much deeper." "I see. You spread yourself." "Very much so. And it was all bright, snappy stuff." "Every word of it." "That's great. I mean to say, no chance of old Bassett being bored when he reads it?" "Reads it?" "Well, he's just as likely to find the book as anyone, isn't he?" I remember Jeeves saying to me once, apropos of how you can never tell what the weather's going to do, that many a glorious morning had he seen flatter the mountain tops with sovereign eye and then turn into a rather nasty afternoon. It was the same with Gussie now. He had been beaming like a searchlight until I mentioned this aspect of the matter, and the radiance suddenly disappeared as if it had been switched off with the main. He stood gaping at me very much as I had gaped at the Reverend A. Upjohn on the occasion to which I have alluded above. His expression was almost identical with that which I had once surprised on the face of a fish, whose name I cannot recall, in the Royal Aquarium at Monaco. "I never thought of that." "Start now." "Oh, my gosh!" "Yes." "Oh, my golly!" "Quite." "Oh, my sainted aunt!" "Absolutely." He moved to the tea-table like a man in a dream and started to eat a cold crumpet. His eyes, as they sought mine, were bulging. "Suppose old Bassett does find that book What do you think will ensue? I could answer that one. He would immediately put the B on the wedding. You don't really think that? I do. He choked over his crumpet. Of course he would, I said. You say he has never been any too sold on you as a son-in-law. Reading that book isn't going to cause a sudden change for the better. One glimpse of it, and he will be countermanding the cake and telling Madeline that she shall marry you over his dead body. And she isn't the sort of girl to defy a parent. Oh, my gosh! Still, I wouldn't worry about that, old man, I said, pointing out the bright side, because long before it happened, Spode would have broken your neck. He plucked feebly at another crumpet. This is frightful, Bertie. Not too good, no. I'm in the soup, up to the thorax. What's to be done? I don't know. Can't you think of anything? Nothing. We must just put our trust in a higher power. Consult Jeeves, you mean? I shook the lemon. Even Jeeves cannot help us here. It is a straight issue of finding and recovering that notebook before it can get to old Bassett. Why on earth didn't you keep it locked up somewhere? I couldn't. I was always writing fresh stuff in it. I never knew when the inspiration would come, and I had to have it handy. You sure it was in your breast pocket? Quite sure. It couldn't be in your bedroom by any chance. No, I always kept it on me so as to have it safe. Safe, I see. And also, as I said before, because I had constant need of it. I'm trying to think where I last saw it. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, it's beginning to come back. Yes, I remember. By the pump. What pump? The one in the stable yard, where they fill the buckets for the horses. Yes, that is where I saw it last, before lunch yesterday. I took it down to jot down a note about the way Sir Watkin slopped his porridge about at breakfast, and I just completed my critique when I met Stephanie Byng and took a fly out of her eye. Bertie! He cried, breaking off. A strange light had come into his spectacles. He brought his fist down with a bang on the table. Silly ass. Might have known he'd upset the milk. Bertie, I've just remembered something. It is as if a curtain had been rolled up and all was revealed. The whole scene is rising before my eyes. I took the book out and entered the porridge item. I then put it back in my breast pocket, where I keep my handkerchief. Well? Where I keep my handkerchief, he repeated. Don't you understand? Use your intelligence, man. What is the first thing you do when you find a girl with a fly in her eye? I uttered an exclamation. Reach for your handkerchief. Exactly, and draw it out and extract the fly with the corner of it. And if there is a small brown leather-covered notebook alongside the handkerchief, it shoots out and falls to earth. You know not where. But I do know where. That's just the point. I could lead you to the exact spot. For an instant I felt braced. Then moodiness returned. Yesterday before lunch, you say? Then someone must have found it by this time. That's just what I'm coming to. I've remembered something else. Immediately after I had coped with the fly, I recollect hearing Stephanie saying, "Hello, what's that?" and seeing her stoop and pick something up. I didn't pay much attention to the episode at the time, for it was just at that moment that I caught sight of Madeline. She was standing in the entrance of the stable yard with a distant look on her face. I may mention that in order to extract the fly, I had been compelled to place a hand under Stephanie's chin in order to steady the head. Quite. Essential on these occasions. Definitely. Unless the head is kept rigid, you cannot operate. I tried to point this out to Madeline, but she wouldn't listen. She swept away and I swept after her. It was only this morning that I was able to place the facts before her and make her accept my explanation. Meanwhile, I had completely forgotten that Stephanie's stooping, picking up the incident. I think it is obvious that the book is now in the possession of this Byng. It must be. Then everything's all right. We shall just seek her out and ask her to hand it back, and she does so. I expect she'll have got a jolly good laugh out of it. Where is she? I seem to remember her saying something about walking down to the village. I think she goes and hobnobs with the curate. If you're not doing anything, you might stroll and meet her." "I will." "Well, keep an eye open for that Scottie of hers. It probably accompanied her." "Oh, yes, thanks." I remembered that he had spoken to me of this animal at my dinner. Indeed, at the moment when my sole meunier was being served, he had shown me the sore place on his leg, causing me to skip that course. "It biteth like a serpent." "Righto, I'll be looking out, and I might as well start at once." It did not take me long to get to the end of the drive. At the gates I paused. It seemed to me that my best plan would be to linger here until Stiffy returned. I lighted a cigarette and gave myself up to meditation. Although slightly easier in the mind than I had been, I was still much shaken. Until that book was back in safe storage, there could be no real peace for the Wooster soul. Too much depended on its recovery. As I had said to Gussie, if old Bassett started doing the heavy father and forbidding bans, there wasn't a chance of Madeline sticking out her chin and riposting with a modern "Is that so?" A glance at her was enough to tell one that she belonged to that small group of girls who still think a parent should have something to say about things, and I was willing to give 100 to 8 that, in the circumstances which I had outlined, she would sigh and drop a silent tear, but that when all the smoke had cleared away, Gussie would be at liberty. I was still musing in sombre and apprehensive vein when my meditations were interrupted. A human drama was developing in the road in front of me. The shades of evening were beginning to fall pretty freely by now, but the visibility was still good enough to enable me to observe that up the road there was approaching a large, stout, moon-faced policeman on a bicycle. And he was, one could see, at peace with all the world. His daily round of tasks may or may not have been completed, but he was obviously off duty for the moment, and his whole attitude was that of a policeman with nothing on his mind but his helmet. Well, when I tell you that he was riding without his hands, you will gather to what length the carefree gaiety of this serene slop had spread. And where the drama came in was that it was patent that his attention had not yet been drawn to the fact that he was being chivied, in a strong, silent, earnest manner, characteristic of this breed of animal, by a fine Aberdeen terrier. There he was, riding comfortably along, sniffing the fragrant evening breeze, and there was the Scottie, all whiskers and eyebrows, herring after him, hell for leather. As Jeeves said later, when I described the scene to him, the whole situation resembled some great moment in a Greek tragedy, where somebody is stepping high, wide and handsome, quite unconscious that all the while Nemesis is at his heels, and he may be right. The constable, I say, was riding without his hands, and but for this disaster when it occurred, might not have been so the disaster when it occurred might not have been so complete. I was a bit of a cyclist myself in my youth, and I think I might have mentioned that I once won a choir boy's handicap in some village sports. And I can testify that when you are riding without your hands, privacy and a complete freedom from interruption are of the essence. The merest suggestion of an unexpected Scottie connecting with the ankle bone at such a time, and you swoop into a sudden swerve. And as everybody knows, if the hands are not firmly on the handlebars, a sudden swerve spells a smeller. And so it happened now. A smeller, and among the finest I have ever been privileged to witness, was what this officer of the law came. One moment he was with us, all merry and bright, and the next he was in the ditch, a sort of Macedon of arms and legs and wheels, with the terrier standing on the edge, looking down at him with that rather offensive expression of virtuous smugness which I have often noticed on the faces of Aberdeen terriers in their clashes with humanity. And as he threshed about in the ditch, endeavouring to unscramble himself, a girl came round the corner, an attractive young prune, upholstered in heather mixture tweeds, and I recognised the familiar features of S. Bing. After what Gussie had said, I ought to have been expecting Stiffy, of course. Seeing an Aberdeen terrier, I should have gathered that it belonged to her. I might have said to myself, if Scotties come, can Stiffy be far behind? Stiffy was plainly vexed with the policeman. You could see it in her manner. She hooked the crook of her stick over the Scott's collar and drew him back, then addressed herself to the man, who had now begun to emerge from the ditch, like Venus rising from the foam. "What on earth," she demanded, "did you do that for?" It was no business of mine, of course, but I couldn't help feeling that she might have made a more tactful approach to what threatened to be a difficult and delicate conference. And I could see that the policeman felt the same. There was a good deal of mud on his face, but not enough to hide the wounded expression. "You might have scared him out of his wits, hurling yourself about like that. Poor old Bartholomew, did the ugly man nearly squash him flat?" Again, I missed the tactful note. In describing this public servant as ugly, she was undoubtedly technically correct. Only, if the competition had consisted of Sir Watkin Bassett, Oofy Prosser of the Drones, and a few more fellows like that, could he hope to win to success in a beauty contest? But one doesn't want to rub these things in. Suavity is what you need on these occasions. You can't beat suavity. The policeman had now lifted himself and bicycle out of the abyss and was putting the latter through a series of tests to ascertain the extent of the damage. Satisfied that it was slight, he turned and eyed Stiffy, rather as old Bassett had eyed me on the occasion when I had occupied the Bossier Street dock. "I was proceeding along the public highway," he began in a slow, measured tone, as if he were giving evidence in court, "and the dog leapt at me in a virulent manner. I was hurled from my bicycle." Stiffy seized upon the point like a practised debater. "Well, you shouldn't ride a bicycle. Bartholomew hates bicycles." "I ride a bicycle, miss, because if I didn't I should have to cover my beat on foot." "Do you good. Get some of the fat off you." "That," said the policeman, no mean debater himself, producing a notebook from the recesses of his costume and blowing a water beetle off it, "is not the point at issue. The point at issue is that this makes twice that the animal has committed an aggravated assault on my person, and I shall have to summons you once more, miss, for being in possession of a savage dog, not under proper control." The thrust was a keen one, but Stiffy came back strongly. "Don't be an ass, Oates. You can't expect a dog to pass up a policeman on a bicycle. It isn't human nature. And I'll bet you started it anyway. You must have teased him or something. And I may as well tell you that I intend to fight this case to the House of Lords. I shall call this gentleman as a material witness." She turned to me, and for the first time became aware that I was no gentleman but an old friend. "Oh, hello, Bertie." "Hello, Stiffy." "When did you get here?" Recently." "Did you see what happened?" "Oh, rather. Ringside seat throughout." "Well, stand by to be subpoenaed." "Righto." The policeman had been taking a sort of inventory and writing it down in the book. He was now in a position to call the score. "Piece of skin scraped off right knee, bruised or contusion on left elbow, scratch on nose, uniform covered with mud and I'll have to go and be cleaned. Also shock, severe. You will receive the summons in due course, miss." He mounted his bicycle and rode off, causing the dog Bartholomew to make a passionate bound that nearly upshipped him from the restraining stick. Stiffy stood for a moment looking after him a bit yearningly, like a girl who wished that she had half a brick handy. Then she turned away, and I came straight down to brass tacks. "Stiffy," I said, "passing lightly over all the guff about being charmed to see you again and how well you're looking and all that, have you got a small brown leather-covered notebook that Gussie Finknottle dropped in the stable yard yesterday?" She did not reply, seeming to be musing, no doubt on the recent oats. I repeated the question, and she came out of the trance. "Notebook? Small brown leather-covered one? Full of a lot of breezy personal remarks?" "That's the one. Yes, I've got it." I flung the hands heavenwards and uttered a joyful yowl. The dog Bartholomew gave me an unpleasant look and said something under his breath in Gaelic, but I ignored him. A kennel of Aberdeen terriers could have rolled their eyes and bared the wisdom tooth without impairing this ecstatic moment. Gosh, what a relief! "Does it belong to Gussie Finknottle?" "Yes." "You mean to say that it was Gussie who wrote those really excellent character studies of Roderick Spode and Uncle Watkin? I wouldn't have thought he had it in him. Nobody would. It's a most interesting story. It appears, though why anybody should waste time on Spode and Uncle Watkin when there was Oates simply crying out to be written about, I can't imagine. I don't think I've ever met a man, Bertie, who gets in the hair so consistently as this Eustace Oates. He makes me tired. He goes swanking about on that bicycle of his, simply asking for it, and then complains when he gets it. And why should he discriminate against poor Bartholomew in this sickening way? Every red-blooded dog in the village has had a go at his trousers, and he knows it. Where's that book, Stiffy? I said, returning to the res. Never mind about books. Let's stick to Eustace Oates. Do you think he means to summons me? I said that, reading between the lines, that was rather the impression I had gathered, and she made what I believe is known as a moo. Is it moo? Shoving out the lips, and drawing them quickly back in again. I'm afraid so too. There is only one word for Eustace Oates, and that is malignant. He just goes about seeking whom he may devour. Oh well, more work for Uncle Watkin. How do you mean? I shall come up before him. Then he does still operate, even though retired? I said, remembering with some uneasiness the conversation between this ex-beak and Roderick Spode in the collection room. He's only retired from Boter Street. You can't shake a man off magistrating once it's in his blood. He's a justice of the peace now. He held a sort of star chamber court in the library. That's where I always come up. I'll be flitting about doing the flowers, or sitting in my room with a good book, and the butler comes and says I'm wanted in the library, and there's Uncle Watkin at his desk, looking like Judge Jeffreys, with Oates waiting to give evidence. I could picture the scene. Unpleasant, of course. The sort of thing that casts a gloom over a girl's home life. And it always ends the same way, with him putting on the black cap and soaking me. He never listens to a word I say. I don't believe the man understands the ABC of justice. That's how he struck me when I attended his tribunal. And that's the worst of it. He knows just what my allowance is, so he can figure out exactly how much the purse will stand. Twice this year he's skinned me to the bone, each time at the instigation of this man Oates. Once for exceeding the speed limit in a built-up area, and once because Bartholomew gave him the teeniest little nip on the ankle. I tut-tutted sympathetically, but I was wishing that I could edge the conversation back to the notebook. One so frequently finds in girls a disinclination to stick to the important subject. The way Oates went on about it, you would have thought Bartholomew had taken his pound of flesh. And I suppose it's all going to happen again now. I'm fed up with this police persecution. One might as well be in Russia. Don't you loathe policemen, Bertie? I was not prepared to go quite so far as this in my attitude towards an, on the whole, excellent body of men. Well, not en masse, if you understand the expression. I suppose they vary, like other sections of the community, some being full of quiet charm, others not so full. I've met some very decent policemen. With the one on duty outside the drones, I'm distinctly chummy. In Ray, this Oates of yours, I haven't seen enough of him, of course, to form an opinion. Well, you can take it from me that he's one of the worst, and a bitter retribution awaits him. Do you remember the time you gave me lunch at your flat? You were telling me about how you tried to pinch the policeman's helmet in Leicester Square. That was when I first met your uncle. It was that brought us together. Well, I didn't think much of it at the time, but the other day it suddenly came back to me, and I said to myself, out of the mouths of babes and sucklings. For months I've been trying to think of a way of getting back at this man Oates, and you had showed it to me. I started. It seemed to me that her words could bear but one interpretation. You aren't going to pinch his helmet. Of course not. I think you're wise. It's man's work, I can see that, so I've told Harold to do it. He's often said he would do anything in the world for me, bless him. Stiff's map, as a rule, tends to be rather grave and dreamy, giving the impression that she is thinking deep, beautiful thoughts. Quite misleading, of course. I don't suppose she would recognise a deep, beautiful thought if you hand it to her on a skewer with tartar sauce. Like Jeeves, she doesn't often smile, But now her lips had parted ecstatically, I think. I should have to check up with Jeeves. And her eyes were sparkling. "What a man," she said. "We're engaged, you know." "Oh, are you?" "Yes, but don't tell a soul. It's frightfully secret. Uncle Watkin mustn't know about it till he has been, well, sweetened." "And who is this Harold?" "The curate down in the village." She turned to the dog Bartholomew. "Is lovely kind curate going to pinch bad, ugly policeman's helmet for his mother then, and make her very, very happy?" she said. Or words to that general trend. I can't do the dialect, of course. I stared at the young pill, appalled at her moral code, if you could call it that. You know, the more I see of women, the more I think that there ought to be a law. Something has got to be done about this sex, or the whole fabric of society, with a capital S, will collapse. And then what silly asses we shall all look. "Curate," I said, "but Stiffy, you can't ask a curate to go about pinching policemen's helmets." "Why not?"